that's just what people do. The theory is you always find somebody new. I guess there was a time I believe that was true, but now...
Hello, YouTubers. It is so good to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the subscriptions and the likes and the watch time. The fact that you guys are coming and you're watching my channel, that makes me happy. I would love for you to share it with your friends. Maybe one day, who knows, this could actually start making money for me. But for now, I'm doing this because I think it needs to be done. I think there's a lot of things that need to be discussed, and a lot of people are so caught up in pop politics that nobody really thinks anything through anymore. Everybody just wants to argue with one another. So today we're going to talk about interventionism and how interventionism appeals to you, whether you like it or you don't, whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. I personally, I'm kind of up in the air, and I'll explain that as I go. Now, it's going to sound like I'm an interventionist, and in a lot of ways, perhaps I am. But we will get to the parts of it that scare me, the parts that I think are a bad idea, that make it really difficult to decide whether I think it's a good idea or not. So, when we talk about interventionism, there's two things we have to consider. We have to consider strategic interventionism, and we have to consider philosophical interventionism. Interventionism, you tell me. So let's start with philosophical, because I think that's the ground that needs to be laid. What do I mean philosophical? Okay, well, first, what do I mean interventionism? So, do we get involved with other countries? Do the United States, do each of these states come together and get involved with the inner workings and with the politics and the wars and all the things that are going on around the world? Should we do that? That's the real question here. So I go back to the philosophy of this. It's the same question to ask: should we get involved with, what we perceive as evil in our own neighborhoods, in our own states, in our own union, in any situation? At what level is it no longer our problem? And again, this is not the political side, this is just moral. This is a moral question for you to ask yourself. I'm not telling you how to feel here. I'm asking you how you feel. And I'm asking you to really measure how you feel against what you see going on around you. So here's the question you have to first ask yourself. We'll start it at the bottom. If you see your neighbor's 15-year-old daughter being raped, do you feel like it's your job to get involved and stop that rape? That is up to you. It really is. So if you say yes, my 15-year-old neighbor is being raped, it's my job to get in there and to stop this horrible act from happening and to protect this child, right? Okay, I agree with you. I believe that, in a case where somebody who lives next door to me is in trouble, I should intervene. So what if it's their neighbor? So what if your neighbor's other neighbor on the other side, and you witness that happening? If you look out the window and you look down the street and you see it happening, do you get involved? I mean, it's not your neighbor, someone else's neighbor. So should you be involved? I say yes. I say that if I see a 15-year-old girl, if I can stop a 15-year-old girl from being raped, then I must stop. That is where my moral line is drawn. If I know of some evil, if I am sure that evil is taking place, then it is incumbent on me to actually step in and stop that evil. Now, what if it is in the next city over? What if you find out that a high power figure is using his position to rape children? Do you get involved? I mean, you're thinking, well, we call the police. Well, that's still you getting involved. If you are the one who's calling the police and bringing on the heat to that person, then you're still the one that's getting involved, right? So, what I'm really asking is, do you just turn your head and say, well, that's the next city over, that's someone else's problem, I'm not getting involved? Is that where you lie? And if so, how do you draw that moral line? Where exactly is that line for you? Where is it no longer your problem that innocent people are being raped and tortured and slaughtered? Or What sort of a crime do you draw that line for? Okay, maybe it's not as much as rape and torture. Maybe if your neighbor's daughter's not being raped, they're being, uh, taken advantage of. They're being robbed. They're being, restricted from their normal rights. What if it's a smaller version of a crime? At what point do you think it's okay to get involved? That's a really difficult moral question. And it has always been. I mean, you go all the way back to the philosophers of ancient Greek. That's always been a difficult question. At what point is it no longer my responsibility to enforce morality on other people, or to protect victims from immoral people? So that's the first difficulty in deciding where you stand on interventionism, because you need to nail that down. If it's okay for a Chinese girl in China to be getting raped by her government, then why is it not okay for your next door neighbor to be getting raped by her government or her family or her neighbor or somebody else? How can you mentally justify looking away from one horrible tragedy, but you feel like you should get involved in another? What is that line for you? How do you justify that? I have a hard time with that, because I don't see any justification for ever letting it be okay. Now you could say that, well, I don't have the means to go over to China and stop them from raping children. Well, that's fine, but we do. We do have the means. We do, in the form of our military, our United States military. Our government is powerful enough to get involved. So that's the next level of the philosophical question is, okay, so now you do have the power to stop evil. Is it your responsibility, because you have the capability of stopping bad things from happening, is it your responsibility to do it? I say it is. I say that if you have the ability, if you are capable of stopping something bad from happening, like stopping it in progress, not preventing it, because it's impossible to prevent. I'm saying that if you are powerful enough to step in and stop evil from taking place, then it's incumbent. It is your duty as a human, not as a person of a nation or a person of a city or a state or a neighborhood or a home. It is your duty as a human to use that power for good, to reach justice, right? So, really morality comes down to justice. And I know that if you've studied, ancient philosophy and ethics, then you've probably come across this in your life, that, morality is about justice. And what does justice mean? Well, the old philosophers said that, being just means being good and being good at it. So, when you're trying to do a good thing, if you do it poorly, then you're not just. I'm trying to help this animal who cannot feed itself, so I'm going to feed it, so that it will live. Okay, at what point have you made it dependent on you to where it can no longer live its free life? At that point, it is no longer just for you to be feeding that animal. You have destroyed its natural inclinations. You've turned it into something it's not, and that is not justice. So being good, doing good things is one thing, but being good at doing good things is how you define justice. Does that make sense to you? Probably not, but if you get it, then we can move on, and I'm going to move on anyway. So this is all the philosophical question. Again, what do you do? Do we get involved? Okay. I say yes, you get involved if you are capable of stopping it from happening. Moving on. There's the other side of interventionism that's really important as well. Strategic interventionism. A lot of people today are like, well, we need to come home from all these wars. We don't need to be fighting wars all over the world. I'm not saying you are wrong, but I'm saying that you need to consider this. I want you to actually think that through, because it sounds great. We should bring everybody home and just defend our borders from within and let everybody else do whatever it is they're doing. Okay, fine. If that's how you feel on a moral side, let's talk about strategic. Let's talk about tactics. Let's talk about what this means to you. That is effectively, we're going to change the scenario for you. We're going to say, let's say you have a couple of houses full of gang members in your neighborhood, and they have made it very clear that they want what you have, right? There's no question that they want what you have. We know this because there are break-ins all the time, and a lot of them are related to gangs. So these guys want to come to your home, they want to break in, they want to take what you have. So what do? You buy a security system, you lock your doors, you basically imprison yourself in order to keep them from coming in. And on small levels that works, okay? So you're keeping the people in gang house A from coming in and people in gang house B from coming in. You're able to stave them off to a certain degree. So why have police? And why do police go to each of these houses? Well, strategically speaking, if you send the cops to gang house A and they break that up, then they've weakened your enemies. And then you send them to gang house B and you break that up. Yes, they rebuild at A, but while they're rebuilding at A, you're over here breaking up B. So what you're doing is you're dissolving the alliances between all these gang houses. What happens if you don't do that? What happens if you live in a gang neighborhood and you decide you're just going to lock up your house and keep everything to yourself and imprison yourself in such a way that you are going to do everything you can to defend it? Do you really believe that if gang house A, gang house B, gang house C, and all the rest have finally exhausted everything else and they've decided that they want what you have, do you believe you can defend yourself from that many people? They will gather. They will come together. And even if they don't like one another, they'll come together for the purpose of taking what you have. And you cannot defend yourself from the entire neighborhood. You can defend yourself from a house or two, but you cannot defend yourself from an entire neighborhood. If you think you can, you're in for a horrible awakening, and it's going to be brutal, and you're not going to live long enough to see how it ends. Don't be stupid. The reality of the world we live in is that if you lock yourself into your house and give me all the time I need to gather alliances, gather tools, gather resources, create infrastructure, and set up a plan, I'm going to get what I want from your house. You cannot stop me. That is reality. So your best defense is a good offense. Your best chance to keep the rest of the world from ganging up on you is to keep the rest of the world isolated from one another. These lessons have been taught in history 100% of the time. You think that Hitler would have been, if Hitler had gone out and dealt with the dangerous countries one at a time, instead of trying to sweep across all of them at once, what do you think would have happened? He would have slowly grown, just as the Soviet Union did. The Soviet Union kind of grew a little bit slowly. They didn't do it the Hitler way. They did it, strategically. And they grew and they grew. Ancient Greece. I think ancient Greece is probably the best example. Now, history teaches you one thing, but the words from history teach you another. What we know about ancient Greece is that they became a democracy. And in that democracy, during the height of the Greek Empire, they came to where many of you are today. They saw how expensive it was to maintain all of these wars and all of these faraway lands that to the people of Greece seemed irrelevant. Look, we have the strongest military in the world, the strongest military the world's ever seen. We can defend Greece from within. We don't need to have our fingers in everybody else's pudding. Well, what happened? So the Greeks decided they were going to have a vote, and in that vote, the populace who felt that way won the vote. They said, okay, as of now, we're going to start bringing home our troops and defend Greece from outside forces. 30 years later, the very last living Greek was enslaved by those outside forces. yes, they brought everybody home. And everybody, that all these little wars that had been keeping the world in chaos for so long ended. And when they ended, all of these people who didn't like each other really didn't like Greece. And they came together, and Greece fell. The Greek Empire fell. Exactly what happened to Rome. The Roman Empire fell because they came home. They stopped fighting those little wars. Look, like it or not, if you don't keep everyone else in chaos, they're going to come after you. Now, you can argue, and I'll hear that argument, that if you were to not have, gone around the world in the first place and become an empire, then they'd be focused elsewhere. And I think for the most part, you might be right. But if you want success, you are going to have people who want to take it from you. If the United States wants success by any definition, there will be factions who oppose our success. And if all we do is sit back and try and protect our success from within, those factions will rise in unison and take it from us. So we must strategically get involved around the world. We must. Which brings me to the final point. Sorry, this is getting kind of long, but this is something we need to understand. Here's where that's a problem, and we're seeing it unfold right now in politics. The question is, when you get involved with these other places and all these things, all of this international espionage, somebody has to do it. And whoever is doing it has to keep it a secret, because you can't let everybody know what we're up to or it won't work, right? So you have to have secrets on the global scale. And you have to get in bed with some really scary people that you really don't want to be in bed with. That's just the nature of the industry. So now we have, we had the former administrations, all of them going all the way back to Reagan, who really, say they wanted to get involved with the Ukraine. And then now we have, the anti-Ukrainian administration who's actually favoring the Russian, growth again. Which is best for us? We don't know. I mean, you and I don't know what is best for us when it comes to international relationships. Maybe the current administration's correct that, a stronger Russia would be good for us. Or maybe the older administrations, going all the way back, were correct that a Russia that was competing against people like, Georgia and the Ukraine and all that, maybe having those broken off parts were good for us. I don't know, and you can decide that for yourself. The point is, the people in power get to do whatever they want to facilitate what they think is best for us. And whether it is or is not is irrelevant to them. They don't care what we think is best for us. They are, we put them in office and they tell us what we want to hear, and then they do what they want to do. That's scary. It scares me to think that maybe, if we do not now, maybe we did in the past, have somebody who's, in a figure of authority who can change global politics in a way that they think is good for us, but is actually bad for us. That's scary. And we'll never know because we don't have access to all these secrets, right? So that's what worries me. If we're getting involved with all these other countries, whose side are we on? You and I don't know, buddy. We don't. You think you do. You don't know. You are sure you do, but you do not know. Everything you think you know, you've gotten from some political source who wants you to think that that's what you should think. It's scary, guys. It is scary. So for those people who are anti-interventionists, when we're talking about the reality of interventionism, I feel your pain, buddy. I'm worried too. I'm scared to death. I think we're in a lot of trouble. And if not now, we will be. Somebody's going to take the wrong side. And we're not going to know what's happening until it's already happened and we're done. So maybe you have an argument. Maybe we should just give everything away and hide from the rest of the world and not get involved so they don't want to come after us. I don't know. I can't argue either way. I really can't. So listen, guys, thank you so much for coming to my channel again. I really appreciate it. Please hit that subscribe button. There will be a lot of better conversations than this one, but it is just something I thought I had to cover. So you guys take care. Thank you. I love you. Peace out.
You heard a while, but that's just what people do. The theory is you always find somebody new. I guess there was a time I